Hi guys, welcome back. In this video I'm going to be covering loops, and I'll explain what a loop is and what each one does as we start putting them together. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with a simple for loop. This is probably the most common loop that I know of and that I use in my code, so this is a good one to learn. And what you use is the for keyword followed by parentheses, and there's three expressions inside. You have your first one, which is your incrementer, and you have to set a value here. So you assign a variable and give it a value. And this 0 can actually be anything. If you have a number outside of your for loop that you want to use as your starting point, then you can certainly do that. The next step is your comparison. So you have $i, and then you have to compare it to some value. So there's going to be like an absolute maximum. So if I is less than 10, or if you have a count on a list item or an array number, so that way you get the total number of items in the array, you can place that there. And then the last one is your increment by. And I just use the shorthand plus plus to increment by 1. And then you just echo out $i. So that'll just put out whatever the current value of I is, and I will put in a break just so that way we can separate everything out. And if I save this and look at our code, we get 0, 1, 2, 3. So, and it's just taking whatever the value of 1 is, or what the value of I is. If I change that to 1, then you'll see that it starts with 1. If we want to, a good example of using this would be to have some kind of table or some kind of list that you're building on a display page. I'll do that really quick. So we have class array equals new array, and I will say Nick, John, Andy, and Dennis. Alright, so we have our array of class members, and we want to create a new table. So we always want the table item to be available, so we create our echo statement and we put out a table, and we'll put in a closing tag for that as well. And then after that, we will go ahead and start our table cell construction. So we'll put in a table row and a table data cell, close both of those. And then within this, I'm going to output the value of $i and add in another table data cell. I will put out the current class index in the class array. And what I want to do is I want to wrap these in curly braces, because PHP will process everything that's inside that curly brace as a PHP item rather than try and process it as regular text. So if I save this and refresh, you see the names, but I also have, I made a mistake of not changing this bit of code here. So I'm going to replace a 10 with a count on the class array. And now that should give me the number of class items, and this should correct that issue. I do want this to start at 0 because my array indexes always start at 0. So now I have that all corrected. That's one form of a for loop. I'm going to go into a for each loop as well, which I'm just going to comment out this for loop here. And then I'll do a for each. And you pass in the array that you want to use as data. And then for each of those items, you say as, and you give it a variable, and it'll assign each of those items within that array to that variable. So I'm going to do as person, and I still have my table opening and closing tags, and I am just going to echo out. Probably be quicker for me to just copy this. There. And the only, well, I say the only difference, with the for loop, the incrementer is built in and the increment amount is built in. With a for each loop, I would have to manually set my incrementer and then also add it in. So now I have I is equal to 0, and every time this loop runs through, it's going to increment I by 1. So I'm going to spit out I, and then this piece here changes from class and then getting the index in the array to a person, since that value in the class array is already assigned to person. So now if I refresh this, I get the same output but using a for each loop. The last couple that I'm going to go through is a while loop. And again, I'm going to use the same format that we've been using. So while, and use the while keyword, and then there's some kind of condition or some kind of check that happens. So while $i is less than count class, we're going to echo, I'll just copy this line here. Actually, I'll copy the original one since that'll work better. So all that I did, I have a table row, table data cell, and I'm outputting the value of I and outputting the current location in the class array as I did with the for loop. So I'm going to assign I again. And this is going to run no matter, this is going to run as long as this condition is true. So as long as I is less than count, then we will be fine. So if I refresh, I had an issue with my code. I forgot to add in my incrementer. So I've got to increase by 1, otherwise this will end up in an infinite loop. So there we go. So always make sure that you watch out for these common bugs. You can end up in an infinite loop with the while loop, and then also the next one that I'm getting into, the do while, which I'll do that right now. Oops. I'm just going to set this up really quick. A do while loop, it always runs the first statement first and then does the check. So no matter what, this is going to get run at least once, even if the condition is false. In this instance, it would be fine. I'm going to add in another $i equals 0, so that way my incrementer gets assigned and my I is getting incremented every time, while I is less than count class. Now if I were to refresh, I still get the same output. So those are different ways of achieving the same result with a for loop, for each, while, and do while. As I stated, the two common ones that cause me some problems are while and do while, since you have to set up your own incrementer. The for each, I use it every now and then, but I'm usually not using an incrementer with it. It's just taking a collection of objects or an array, and I'm just spitting out the values that I find inside of it. I really don't care what the current count is. And then the for loop is the most common one that I use, and I find it the easiest to understand and follow. So definitely take a look at the rest of these and different implementations. We're going to use them quite a bit once we get to putting everything all together. So hopefully that'll make a little more sense once we get there. But I wanted to take a minute to show you guys how to do this.